They say fear lives in the mind, but that's only half true. Fear also lives in the places we don't talk about, the dark corners of your home. The silence after midnight, the footsteps you hear when you know you're alone. Tonight's stories will take you there, and once you hear them, you'll never think of safe the same way again. It started with the timer on my router. Not a dramatic thing to notice, just a blinking little light that always syncs to the same second every hour. I realized the pattern because I work nights and the quiet makes you notice small things. The light would blink twice at 12 o'clock, once at 12:30, then 3 times at 1 o'clock. I made a joke to myself about how the router had more personality than my neighbor. I set my coffee down, pulled up the log files, and told myself I'd look at it later. Later came and went. The blinking kept me company like a metronome. A week passed. The pattern didn't change, but the timing drifted. It was subtle at first, half a second one night, a full second the next, but after a few days it was obvious. The blinks were late and never in the same way twice. Sometimes they lingered, sometimes they stuttered. I had told myself I was imagining it. The human brain loves patterns and hates silence. The first real thing was the knocking. It was late past 2, and I was on the couch, half asleep under a blanket that smelled like laundry, soft wraps against the window. Not the front door, not the back of my bedroom window. I sat up because the house is quiet enough that any sound feels like someone in the room. The knocks were slow. 1, pause, 1, pause. Like someone testing the glass. I went to the window and peered out into the backyard. The yard was the same as always, a patch of grass, a leaning fence, and the neighbor's old streetlight casting a tired orange pool. Nobody, no shadow, no flashlight, nothing to explain the sound. I checked the lock, a habit I'd had since a break-in in the city a few years ago. Secure. The knock stopped when I was at the window. I told myself it had to be a branch or a raccoon. I went back to bed. Over the next few days, the noises increased in small increments. A tap on the ceiling in the early morning that I thought was the upstairs neighbor, but I don't have an upstairs neighbor. A faint shuffling from the hall that faded when I reached the doorway. The router light drifted more. Twice, my phone alarm failed to go off, but the clock on my microwave chimed on time. Timing and silence misaligned in subtle ways, like someone left a few screws loose in the world. The thing about slow terror is how it attaches itself to routine. I started doing small tests. I recorded the router light for an hour. The video file showed nothing but a steady flash. I left a sticky note on the window that said door at 10 p.m. just to see if anything changed. The note was still there the next morning, untouched. One night, I left my bedroom door slightly ajar and sat in the living room with a mug of cold coffee, listening. The house sighed. At 3:13 a.m., the mug vibrated as if someone had tapped the table beside me. Nothing there. The coffee sloshed, leaving a damp crescent on the coaster. It's easy to laugh at yourself, to collect small oddities in a mental box labeled weird but explainable. That's what I did until I found the footprint. I keep old shoes under the bed boots, a pair for the yard because I move in and out a lot. One morning, the floor beside the bed had a smudge of damp soil. Not massive, not like a muddy shoe lost in a storm, but a tidy crescent of dirt, as if someone had stepped lightly and withdrawn. I assumed it was mine. I have gone barefoot on the porch. I have tracked things inside. I cleaned it up, but not before seeing something else. A tiny imprint on the windowsill. The sill has paint ridges. The mark fit between them, like a thumbnail pressed to wet plaster. That night, I set up a camera, an old webcam aimed at the bedroom door. I didn't even intend to catch anything dramatic. I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind. The footage is what people think it will be. Hours of empty mattress, a clock's quiet blur, and then at 2:02 a.m., the camera picks up a sliver of movement at the edge of the frame. Not a person, more like a throat of shadow slipping between light and darker light. The recorded audio is stripped of sound because I demuted the microphone so I could sleep through my own snoring. I played the video back and felt stupid for being scared. And then I stepped closer and saw that the shadow's edges weren't natural. It moved with the wrong hesitation, a gesture that made me think of someone reading a page and skipping a line. The next morning, the neighbor's kid asked if I'd been having construction. "Saw a ladder last night," he said casually over the fence. "My fence has no ladder leaning on it." I thanked him and watched him ride away. The feeling in my chest had a physical weight now, something below the sternum that tightened and wouldn't relax. I called in a locksmith to check the doors and the locks because you do the sensible thing. He was a stocky guy who hummed while he worked. He agreed the deadbolt was fine. "People forget sliding catches," he said, tapping the window latch. He left and I told myself the sound and the soil were probably animal related. The man's knowledge made me breathe easier for a few hours. A week later, the neighborhood watch put out an email. Petty thefts. Nothing violent. Items taken from porches in the early morning. People left lights on, got a little jumpy, but it was framed as small-town annoyance. The email ended with a request. Lock your windows. One night, I woke to a sound like someone exhaling through a closed, mouth soft, wet, deliberate. I held my breath. It came again, closer. This time I had the presence of mind to grab my phone and switch the flashlight on. The beam landed on the doorway and froze because there was a person standing in the hall. At first, I thought it was a neighbor returning something, a silhouette in a hoodie. It was not a full person. It was right at the edge of comprehension, a torso with no clear head, limbs that shifted angles too fast, like a puppet whose operator had misread the script. It stood perfectly still then, as if it had been a piece of the wall all along, and I had only noticed a flaw in the paint. I whispered, "Hey, because what else do you say?" The thing didn't reply. It tilted something like a head, an impression more than an anatomically correct motion. My phone slipped from my hand and clattered into the carpet. When I bent to pick it up, the light reached the hall, and the figure was gone. There were no footsteps, no door creaks, just the faint impression of a presence. The same way you sense someone standing too close in an elevator, even if you can't see them. After that, I stopped sleeping. Or rather, I slept in fragments. I started leaving lights on in the living room and sitting on the couch until dawn. I convinced myself that the house needed me to be awake. I told myself I was doing the adult thing, that vigilance was proactive. The router light continued its stuttering. I'd fall asleep for 10 or 20 minutes and jerk awake when the sound of the microwave or the refrigerator or nothing seemed to take on pattern and meaning. One morning, I opened the refrigerator and found my favorite mug on the middle shelf, exactly where I keep the butter dish. It had a thin brown smear along the rim, like someone had breathed tobacco smoke into it. I never smoke. I texted a friend to see if I'd had company. No one replied, no surprises there. I scrubbed the mug in the kitchen and for the first time felt the sensation of being watched as a continuous thing, not a series of incidents. The final night wasn't cinematic. There was no storm, no banging at the door. I had fallen asleep on the couch with the TV muted, subtitles on in case the house made noise and I needed the words to keep me from panicking. I woke partially because the air in the room felt wrong, thicker, colder, like someone had opened the fridge door and left it ajar. At the edge of my vision, across the room, a shape sat in my recliner. It looked like someone I'd seen on the news once, a neighbor's silhouette cropped by porch light, but it was less and more. The chair was slightly depressed, as if someone had just stood up, but the space held something, as if the idea of a person could remain even after a person left. My throat tightened. I kept my eyes on it, counting breaths, because panic makes you do small, measurable things. 5, 6, 7. On the 8th breath, the recliner creaked, as if a hip had shifted. The silhouette moved its head, or the space where a head should be adjusted, and that was the moment something inside me broke. I realized then that the small evidences, the knocks, the footmark, the router's beat were like fingerprints of attention. This thing didn't need our physical world so much as it learned to mimic the edges of it. It was patient. It was a grip of presence slow, eroding. I didn't call the police. What would I tell them? that something was impersonating a person, leaving half traces and theatrical smudges, that I'd caught a shadow on camera that behaved like a misremembered phrase. I packed a bag instead. I left the house at dawn with nothing but a phone, keys, and the mug, cleaned in ritual. I put the key under the same brick I'd used for decades, and told myself I'd come back, that the rational world would reassert itself if I gave it enough distance. 2 days later, at noon, my landlord called to ask about the gutter. "You left a note on your door," he said. Said don't come back. I hadn't. He told me he'd seen a camera set up in the front window, and that the footage showed someone walking up the path at 213 A.M. No hoodie, no face, just a shape, elongated, pressing its palm to the glass and standing very still until the porch light flicked off. The landlord said the person looked like it was listening. He laughed and said he'd call the police if anything else happened. I didn't go back. My friends called. I said I'd stay with them for a while. I stayed for 3 nights and then moved into a cheap fluorescent hotel where the ceilings were too high and the background hum made me feel normal. The first week away was quiet. I drank coffee in public and smiled at strangers and measured out the days like steps. On the 8th night, a photo landed in my messages from an unknown number. It was of my bedroom window. The frame was taken from outside, maybe from the street. On the sill, plain as day, was a smear of paint, and pressed into it, the same tiny crescent mark I had once seen. Under the photo was a single line of text. We were listening. I deleted the message and sat in the hotel room until dawn, listening to the plumbing and the distant highway. I try to tell myself that things have limits, that patterns end. But there is a sound now that I can't quite place, a hollow doubling of any silence, like the world holding its breath just a little too long. I dream in small things, the feeling of a clock skipping a second, the taste of cold metal after you have dropped your keys, the light on a router blinking just so. Sometimes, when I'm alone in a quiet room, the hair on my arms raises as if someone lowers their voice nearby and says the name of the street I walked down as a child. It's not a name I used in years, but the familiarity makes the sound closer than it should be. I tell myself it's memory, misfired neurons. I tell myself that the world is mostly physics and nothing more. But tonight, as I write this, my phone buzzed, no number, no text preview, nothing beyond a vibration. When I looked, the screen showed a single image I hadn't opened, my front door. The timestamp is 2:13 a.m. The key in the lock is turned outward from the inside. There is no sign of forced entry. There are no prints but the ones I left when I lived there. The landlord says nothing new. My friends say I should come back, check the house, prove that I can reclaim a place in my ordinary life. I think about that, about walking up the path and turning the knob and stepping into a room that might still hold the shape of someone who learned how to be a house. I don't know if I'll go. I don't know what to expect when I do. The image on my phone sits there like a page that's been dog-eared. It feels like an invitation or a dare. I can feel the pull in the quiet between my thoughts. If you get a picture in the middle of the day of something you locked at night, don't assume it's coincidence. Don't assume the absence of damage means you're safe. Some things don't leave marks the way you expect. They leave the impression of attention, and attention is a shape that grows to fit the space it's given. I don't know what it wanted. I don't know how long it stayed. But when something practices being a person long enough, it eventually learns to come home. The booking said, secluded cabin, perfect for a quiet weekend. That was true. In the way that the road being easy to find is true when you already know where you're going. It was a narrow lane through trees, gravel crunching under my tires until the forest opened and the cabin sat squat and wooden. A porch that sagged like it had been waiting. The pictures had been flattering warm lights, a stone fireplace, a view over a dark lake. I told myself I needed the solitude. I told myself the city noise had finally become too much. It was late October, and the air had that brittle edge that makes everything sound further away. I unloaded my bag, locked the car, and felt the first small relief of being somewhere that wasn't my apartment. The keys jangled inside. I made coffee, turned the fireplace on, and read for an hour until the light faded, the kind of slow, comfortable ritual that usually calms me. The cabin felt intact, old, but cared for. A small radio sat on a shelf, a stack of board games under a table, a jar of matches by the hearth. Around 10, I noticed the first small thing, a faint pattern on the floorboards near the back door. It looked like a scuff, but repeated, like tiny footprints left by something heavy and dragging. I told myself it was just previous guests, muddy boots, or a branch tapping the door when the wind shifted. I cleaned it up and made a note to tell the host in the morning. I slept in fits. Not nightmares exactly, just that half sleep where you are aware of sounds but can't quite place them. When you stay somewhere new, every noise becomes a language you have to slowly decipher. The house creaked and settled, which is normal. At 3 in the morning, I woke to a sound like someone walking very lightly across the room, soft, but sure. I lay still and waited for it to repeat. It didn't. After a few minutes, I convinced myself it had been the house. I had driven 2 hours, I was groggy, and my brain was filling spaces with shapes. Morning felt safer. Fog sat low over the lake like a sheet. I went out on the porch with my coffee and watched the water. No one else around for miles. The host, a woman named Claire, had left a binder with house rules and a phone number for emergencies. The number answered with a cheerful recorded message. I dialed it just to see if it was real. It was an automated line that said, "Thank you for staying at Lakeside Cabin. Good enough." I spent the day hiking an old trail the host had suggested. The path wound under low branches, and at one turn there was an old picnic table and a set of carved initials in the wood. They looked like they'd been there a long time. On my way back, I noticed some items near the tree line. A shoe half buried in leaves, a faded scarf tangled on a branch. The kind of thing you see in rural places and don't think about much. I took a picture because it felt like proof I wasn't imagining things. That evening I cooked, watched a movie on my laptop, and fell into a sort of contented numbness. Outside, the wind rose and the trees tapped a slow rhythm. I slept better that night, which made the next morning feel simple and ordinary until I found the message. It was a note slid under the bedroom door, folded twice, corners soft like it had been handled before. My name was written in careful print. The note said only, "Do not open the back door after dark. Don't make noise." "It hears movement. No signature." I stood in the doorway and read it again until the letters blurred. My first instinct was to laugh some prank, a previous guest trying to be clever. My second was annoyance. Who leaves a note like that? The third was a slow, creeping panic. The phrase, "It hears movement," doesn't have a rational explanation unless you give it one, and my brain started offering up all the things that could follow. I called Claire. Her voice over the phone was warm and apologetic. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she said. "I thought we'd left that out. I meant to fix it. It's, old guests have started leaving notes. Weird tradition." It's probably nothing. When I asked what she meant by it, she changed the subject to local attractions. She said she'd stop by later to check the cabin. When she hung up, I felt slightly reassured. People who write weird notes in rental cabins are often just strange, not dangerous. She arrived mid-afternoon with a neighbor, both bundled against the wind. They were polite, the casual kind of friendliness that comes with small towns. Claire looked embarrassed when I showed her the note. "We put out a sign last year after some kids went too close to the shore," she said. "They heard something and ran. No one was hurt. Folks got spooked. People leave notes now, like a superstition, I guess." Her neighbor muttered something about raccoons. The way she said it felt like trying to put a lid on a simmering pot. She avoided my eyes when I asked where the kids had gone. "Don't worry," she said. "You'll be fine." She left a little later with a promise to text if anything came up. That night I slept with the lights on. At around 2 a.m., I woke again to the sound of the back door soft, like a hand pushed through a veil. Not the slam of the wind, not the creak of an old hinge. The sound of something pressing against wood from the outside. I sat absolutely still, listening. From outside came a scratching, like nails dragged across clapboard, patient and careful. My phone said 2:07. I went to the window and peered into the dark. The porch light painted the area in a weak cone. Beyond that, the trees melted into black. I could see nothing but the suggestion of movement, a smear at the edge of the light, the suggestion of breath fogging the air. The back door stood firm. The latch was set. The scratching stopped. A long silence settled, like the house itself was holding its breath. I wanted to call someone, but the rational part of me knew what an absurd thing that sounded like. There's something outside making scratching noises. Who would come at 3 a.m.? I didn't want to wake neighbors for nothing. I did the only small, awkward thing that seemed possible. I played a recording of loud television on my laptop and moved my chair where I could see the back door. The sound came again, softer this time, a deliberate moving of something heavy along boards. Then the distinct noise of something tapping the glass of the back window, 3 small taps, spaced out like a slow heartbeat. I couldn't move. I felt older than I was, as if all the small consequences of all the foolish things I'd ever done had finally condensed into the present moment. When the tapping stopped, there was a new sound, the sound of someone standing very close to the house and breathing. But the breath was not human. It was wet and slow and regular, like air coming through cloth. I thought of an animal, an injured deer, a raccoon, but the timing was wrong. There was a patient intelligence to it, as if something was testing the perimeter. The next morning, there was a fresh ring of mud around the porch, like someone had stood in a puddle and spun in a circle. Footprints? No, they were too irregular, like an animal had been dragged. I told myself it was leaves and rain, and that my tired brain was turning patterns into meaning. I started packing when I found another note, this one tucked into the jar of matches by the hearth. Don't look at it, it said, in the same hand. If you see its face, it will learn yours. Nonsense. Sensible people pack their bags and leave when they feel unsafe. I moved quicker. My hands trembled with a kind of cold anger. I put everything in the car, locked the cabin, and stood for one last look at the window. The back door was closed. Through the glass, I thought I saw a shape, not a face exactly, but the suggestion of a profile long and softened, as if seen through fog. I told myself it was my own reflection, the bend in the glass, the play of light. I drove away slow, glancing in the rear view until the trees closed behind me. 10 minutes down the road, my phone buzzed with a text from Claire. Please check the security cam footage. We just watched last night. You weren't the only one who heard it. She sent a link that opened into seconds of grainy night vision, a view of the back porch, then something stepping into the frame tall, thin, its head moving in jerky animal ways. It stood at the back door for a long time, hand pressed to the glass. Then, as if aware of the camera, it turned its head straight toward the lens. For a moment, the grain clarified, and there was the outline of something that should not have had a face the way a human does. It was a smear of features, a suggestion of a mouth and 2 dark hollows. It leaned forward until the glass fogged as if exhaling. Then it looked directly into the camera, and half my lights went out in a way I can only describe as a mental blackout and instinctual recoil. After that, the footage cut. The timestamp overlaid the screen, 2:12 a.m. The next clip was at 3:45 a.m., showing nothing but an empty porch and a tripod knocked over. I still don't know what I saw. Claire called and apologized again, voice thin with something like fear. We thought it died down, she said. We thought whatever it was would leave. She told me other guests had left after hearing tapping and breathing. She told me someone had called the county once about noises on the shore, and that people had searched and found nothing. She told me that in the old stories, the thing tracked movement and learned faces. She said it sounded foolish when she said it out loud, and we both laughed in that small way people do when they are trying to keep their fear inside a box. I didn't go back. Sometimes I replay the footage on bad days, scrubbing frame by frame, trying to find a scene, a hint of a raccoon, a trick of light. My brain offers solutions, then pulls them away. Sometimes I dream the tapping, and in the dream the tapping comes from inside the house. The last message Claire sent me was 2 weeks later. A photo from another host down the road, an old wooden sign someone had nailed to a tree. The letters were half worn, but you could still read them. Watch your movement. Do not make eye contact. I don't know if it reads faces the way we do. I don't know if it learns a person the first time it looks or if it needs repetitions. I do know a small, compulsive thing. Whenever I notice a faint tap on my apartment window at night now, I hold my breath and don't move. I don't look. I leave the light on. Sometimes I think I've been lucky, and other times the silence feels too deliberate, as if patience has a purpose. If you ever book a place that feels too quiet, listen to the small noises and decide which ones you can live with. If you find a note tucked somewhere, don't laugh at it too soon. And if you ever hear 3 soft taps on the glass, 3 careful, patient taps, don't look up. Close your eyes and pretend you never moved. Stay very still. Because whatever it is, it's learning what we are by the way we move. And it seems to prefer faces it has seen before.